Welcome everybody to World Rainforest Day, June 22nd, 2023. This is our 7th World Rainforest Day, and I am delighted to invite Governor Gary Juffa from Oro Province in Papua New Guinea to be our keynote speaker. I could spend time talking about Governor Juffa, but I almost want Governor Juffa to tell us a little bit about who he is.
So, well, thank you, Nianta, and hello, everyone out there. I am honored to be given the opportunity, the privilege to speak on this very subject that is very close to my heart, the rainforests, nature, our natural environment. And, I am glad to be here. So just as a way of background, my name is Gary Juffa. I am an elected government official, elected into the Parliament of Papua New Guinea. And I have been in Parliament since 2012. So this is my third term. And it has been a journey fighting, I would say, much of the way to bring about reforms to, so that I could protect our forests, protect our natural environment, teach our people and find innovative ways to utilize our land in a sustainable manner so that we can still generate an income, we can still live, so that we can be able to afford what it is that we need to take care of our families, but doing so with the philosophy of understanding that we need our natural environment, probably more so than it needs us, And anyhow, I used to be the Commissioner of Customs prior to getting into the political landscape or space. And within the Customs Department, I worked there for almost 16 years. Most of that time I spent in the law enforcement division, the investigations and intelligence branch, investigating primarily transnational crimes and customs offenses and acts of impropriety by staff within the organization, etc. And so my background is law enforcement and investigations. And during this period of time, I started to see, crimes being committed in my country against our indigenous people, our landowners, our resource owners. I mean, please excuse the word because we are not indigenous people. We are the people from Papua New Guinea. So just as a way of background as well for those who may not know much about Papua New Guinea, I mean, you have internet now. You can just go on and find out as much as you want about Papua New Guinea, but very quickly, just some pointers that I think are interesting. Papua New Guinea is the largest Pacific Island nation. It has a population of around 10 million. And it is home to the third largest rainforest in the world. It's about 1% of the world's real estate, but it has 7% of the world's biodiversity. And there are many species of endemic plants, many endemic species of plants, flora and fauna that are found in Papua New Guinea that you can't find anywhere else. It's also home to the sugarcane, which was discovered in Papua New Guinea. Bananas were first cultivated in Papua New Guinea. And it's also home to the Cook Swamp, which is the other location where horticulture by human beings first took place in the world besides the Fertile Crescent. In Papua New Guinea, there are about 1,000 tribes, and we speak around 830 languages. So every Papua New Guinean you meet usually speaks between 5 and 10 languages. I myself speak about 5 languages. And these languages are not dialects, they're distinct languages. So it's home to, the largest collection of languages you can ever find in the world. It's also home to the largest butterfly in the world. It's also home to, a variety of species of birds of paradise, most of which are endemic to PNG. It's also home to the only poisonous bird in the world, the most poisonous snake in the world, which is the banded sea kite, I believe, in the oceans, in the waters of Papua New Guinea. So those are just some things that I thought I would share with you. There are 22 provinces. My province is known as the Northern Province. It is 22,000 square kilometers and has a population of 260,000 people. And it is home also, my province, to the largest conservation area in Papua New Guinea, known as the Managlas Conservation Area, which I'll be speaking about at this discussion or in this discussion. So that's a little bit of a background about Papua New Guinea. I grew up in a forested area. I'm from the Hunjara tribe, the Soriane clan, and I am a forest person. I grew up in the rainforest, and the rainforest was my playground, my pharmacy, my supermarket, my entertainment center, you know, my therapeutic place to go and meditate, whatever you want to call it. It provided everything that I needed. So I have a lot of time and connectivity with the rainforest.
To Governor Juffa, that is so amazing to hear. As you know, most people don't understand or know much about Papua New Guinea. They've sort of heard of it, right? And to hear these mind-blowing statistics, because they are 1,000, languages. You have all these peoples that have evolved over tens of thousands of years. It's very old civilizations and a way of living and knowing.
Correct. In fact, recently, and many of you would know this, there was a discovery in a place called Denisova of a type of hominid that they refer to as the Denisovan. And the descendants of Denisovans are primarily, or the people who have the highest content of Denisovan DNA are Melanesians, primarily Papua New Guineans and Australian Aboriginals. And it's so amazing that Denisova, which is in Russia, all the way in a very cold, faraway place, has that connectivity with Papua New Guineans and other Melanesians. So we're still learning a lot of things, even about ourselves, I mean, I'm from Papua New Guinea. I still learn things that I didn't know about my own country, my own province, even my own tribe. For instance, just recently, I didn't realize that we have a clan that has maternal ownership and stewardship of land in my province. This, prior to 2012, I didn't know that. I was in Parliament when a team of women leaders came to me, and they had a proposal. They wanted to register their land because they wanted to protect it. And it was quite surprising for me. By the way, 97% of land in Papua New Guinea is owned by Papua New Guinean clans and tribes, So when they came to me and said, we want to do this, I was quite surprised. I said, well, where are your leaders? And they said, where are the leaders? They were actually annoyed with me that I didn't know this. And I said, we have maternal land ownership in my province because it exists in some other provinces. In Milne Bay Province, New Ireland, Bougainville, Autonomous Region of Bougainville, there's about 5 provinces where maternal stewardship and land ownership is the case for their tribes there. In most of the provinces, it's paternal, so the men are in charge of the land. But in this instance, I learned something new. So yes, we keep learning things as we go along. Yeah.
Is that partly because the focus for the world has not been so much in this part of the world? You've spoken about it. A lot of people don't know about it. Sometimes we need to know what exists and why it exists or how it exists before we start appreciating and understanding and trying to do something about it. I was most particularly fascinated by your 97% statistic, and you've shared that before. If 97% of the land is owned by the clans and the tribes, and yet we know about the kinds of threats and what happens, will you talk a little bit about how little we know about what's really going on, and if you think that a population has control over the majority of the land, that would mean that things should be okay, but they're not.
Well, they're not, because see, we had very ancient structures that existed to govern tribes. Each tribe had their own set of tribal laws, okay? They had their own justice system and they had their own means of conflict resolution, as well as managing their environment and themselves and conflicts with other tribes. All of those were dismantled with the advance of Christianity, with the arrival of colonial administration or colonial powers at that time. And the colonial powers arrived into Papua New Guinea, and they found that the best way to control the people was to dismantle the systems they had that they subscribed to and put in place their system, to control their minds, and therefore be able to conquer the people without having to resort to violence and physical effort, which would have been very difficult for the colonial administration, because the people, well, we're a forest people. We know our forest. We know how to protect it. We know how to, we're a warlike people as well, which is something I also wanted to mention. It wasn't as if our tribes were all living in peace. We were warlike tribes. And so if anything that looked like a threat came to us, we would aggressively attack that threat, And a very classic example of that is in India, I believe, the Andaman Islands. The people there who I've seen and I feel are Melanesians. I believe are Melanesians. They look very Melanesian. Now, their reaction is how we would normally react to anyone coming to our, territory. But what the colonial administration did was to bring our fellow Pacific Islanders. They brought Fijians, who look like us, who are Melanesians. They brought Samoans, and they brought Tongans, who also look like us in some ways, because Papua New Guinea is made up of primarily Melanesians, but you also have Micronesian and Polynesian tribes as well. So these people were able to help pacify us, with the story of Christianity, and teach us to turn the other cheek and forgive and forget, and we're all going to heaven, and such teachings that, where people have their own personal perception, but in my opinion, that was a very clever move by the administration to control a people, to pacify them, to make them easy to manipulate, So eventually they dismantled all these systems, these tribal systems that were in place and that had been put in place for thousands of years to protect tribes as well as their environment and how to manage, life, for the members of the tribe. And so now that's all been dismantled. People have become Christianized and they believe in the new system of government, with the new justice system, the new laws, the government administration, which can be easily manipulated by insidious forces, So for instance, and I say this about the timber cartels that have come into Papua New Guinea.
Before you do that, will you, yes, it would be great if you can give a little context about the timber cartels. We're going to assume that a lot of the audience knows about that, but we're also going to give people benefit of doubt to give them the background, because, and I'll point one interesting thing, which is you talk about these systems, whether they're political or otherwise, but and legal systems, and you've actually chosen that path as a way of actually countering some of this, and it is your way of life actually to marry the two, to do that. We'll come back to that, but it'd be really cool for you to sort of give the context for the timber cartels and what is it and why are they coming, and then who are they?
Well, I mean, the exploitation of timber resources is prevalent in any country where there are timber resources, So, and timber resource exploitation is always associated with organizations and individuals who oftentimes carry out their activities with very little regard to the law and with very little regard to, they'll maintain third largest rainforest in the world, on the island of New Guinea. And we had a timber industry a thriving timber industry, I would say, where we had companies from various parts of the world operating here, and they obeyed the laws more or less. There was reforestation programs. They ensured that their logging activities did not take place in various areas, and they went into downstream processing. So we had timber mills that were processing plywood, wood chip mills, and lumber yards, etc. Now, in the 90s, we saw a new type of timber entity come into Papua New Guinea, and they came from Malaysia. Okay, now, if you look at the Malaysian timber industry and what has happened there, then you will know that that industry is fraught with corruption, you know, and the manner in which they carry out their activities is very, very unsavory. You know, oftentimes it's in breach of the rights of the indigenous people. In Malaysia, they have indigenous people there in places like Sarawak. And so they've basically brought that template into Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, and they're applying it, you know, which is they come in, they compromise and corrupt the government systems that are in place, and they put their own perverted system in place to access timber resources. So the process of licensing, permitting, they've basically paralyzed all of this, you know, and now they are the ones in charge. All the legitimate timber companies that were operating had to close shop because they couldn't operate anymore, and they left. And now you've got these guys who are operating in Papua New Guinea and avoiding the payment of taxes. They basically, knowing that the clans own the land, they can compromise the clan leaders, which happens easily in certain areas. So for instance, in my tribal area, where in my province, that did not happen. My tribe burned $10 million worth of their machines and put them on a canoe and put them down the river and said, if you come back, you won't be going out alive, you know, so they don't come to our area. But in other tribal areas, especially at the coastal areas, they do go there because the people there have been so pacified that they're easily, you know, going to give in to bribes, to trinkets, to a road, to a school. And also you have to understand that in many of these remote areas, government services are so poor that anything that looks like a government service and is coming about as a result, you know, to the village people, to tribesmen in those areas, these are just a bunch of trees. They see them every day. They don't know the true commercial value of these trees, you know. And you have to understand in Papua New Guinea, there's 67% illiteracy. So in many of these areas, the people are quite illiterate and don't know their own rights. And if their tribal leader can be compromised, then they're going to willingly just let these companies come in and take away all their trees and just build a tiny church or a little road or a bridge, and they'll say that's development, and they'll be happy with that, you know.
So what can people in different parts of the world do about that? What can how, you know, we're talking about World Rainforest Day, and we as founders of World Rainforest Day, we wanted to bring more attention to tropical rainforests because they are life itself, right? And
correct.
And so how do we bring the whole idea of World Rainforest Day is how do we celebrate these forests? How do we acknowledge the role they play? How do we engage and invite, engage, activate, and enroll ever-growing numbers of people to join us in doing the work of acknowledging their importance and protecting them? But, you know, how many people listening actually know anything about what you've just described? I would say very few, unless they're in the working in the region, or even news coverage rarely ever mentions what you know what's actually happening, what you see day to day. So I'd love to have you talk about that. And the other is, what does your day-to-day look like? One of the reasons we had trouble, you know, finding times, besides the time zone differences, is because you spend a lot of time in court. It would be really lovely to hear, you know, what are things other people can do? How do they educate and understand what's happening in your backyard that actually feels like your immediate backyard, but it's our global backyard, right? This is our home. We have one home. And then how do you personally deal with that? So I'm asking you a longish question so you can have the time without interruption.
Thank you, Nyanza. Well, you know, the best way people can help is to learn as much as possible about what is going on in forested nations. And I guarantee that what's happening in Papua New Guinea is not unique to Papua New Guinea. I know for a fact that what is happening in Papua New Guinea is also happening in the Solomon Islands, which is another Pacific Island country, much smaller than Papua New Guinea, but also significantly forested, and also a Melanesian people, also tribal cultures, also they own their own land. And what is happening here is also happening in Malaysia and parts of Asia, Indonesia. It's also happening in the Amazon, you know, where the Amazon forests are, or the nations that house the Amazon forests. And where people who are forest people, indigenous people, are being brutally suppressed, oftentimes by their own governments or with the, you know, knowledge of their government. And there is oftentimes apathy or it's just complicit, you know, effort. But all these activities where forest resources, timber mainly, are being cut down, processed, shipped off for huge profits. They're all happening at such a rate that we really need to pay attention and do something about it collectively as a people, as you know, as citizens of Earth. So what I would propose is people need to learn as much as possible about what's happening. That's one. Two, they need leaders that will get into parliament and fight to help this. We have to all come together, you know. And this is what I've found, Nyanta, that oftentimes the good people, they don't come together to fight against what's evil or what's wrong, you know. They're happy to stand in a corner, preening their angel wings and polishing their halos in their white robes, but they don't want to get involved other than that, other than to comment or say something's not right. We have to do more than that. Evil lurks in its lair. It has fangs, it has claws. It's going to protect its way of life. It's not going to just get up and walk away because you call it out and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. Someone's going to have to get in there and deal with that. That's what I'm doing from my perspective. And so I've taken the route of going to politics and then going through the legal process, going to court to fight these cartels, because that's what they are. They are not companies, as far as I'm concerned. They're not investors. They're not developers. They are criminal cartels. That's what they are. And so they should be treated like that by all countries. Okay, for instance, the countries that are importing this timber, they should not be importing this timber because this timber is tainted. It's coming from, you know, places where these cartels have illegally obtained or corruptly obtained licenses and permits and are basically raping this forest and shipping this timber off. So these countries shouldn't, one, accept that timber. Two, they shouldn't be accepting any revenues that come from this activity. But many of these countries, including or especially developed nations, you know, are actually allowing the investment of these funds in their economies. They go and they invest in real estate, in restaurants, in, you know, tech industries, whatever you name it. You know, so something has to be done where all the so-called good people of this world have to come together and work aggressively hard to protect these forests, you know, because these forests, like other ecosystems, are the pillars that basically maintain life on Earth. And if they're gone, and if they fall apart, then, you know, it threatens life on Earth. I mean, we are losing species of flora and fauna daily, yearly. If you look at the list of creatures, flora and fauna that are disappearing thanks to human activity, it's shocking, you know. So what are we doing about it? Well, as individuals, I would say learn as much as possible. Read up, do research. Information now, because of the internet age, is so easily accessible. Then once you know this information, if you're just one person, you're not going to make much of a difference. Your voice isn't going to be heard. If you stand up, no one's going to pay attention to you. But if you're a group, if you stand up together, if you raise your voice together, you'll find others like you, gather, Go to whoever's elected into parliament on your behalf. Petition that person. Get them to be a leader for the people, for nature, for the right reasons. Many of them are actually leaders for corporate entities that sponsor the elections. That's not supposed to be the case. Even corporate entities, transnational corporate entities, big business, they have to understand that if there's no future, well, they're not going to be making profits. How are they going to be relevant in a future that they don't even exist? So this is about their existence too. So we've got to get everyone together and say, hey, something needs to be done. Identify the bad actors and deal with them. So that's what I've been doing. I've been reaching out to Interpol, and Interpol's now coming into the country. We've got, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime assisting us. We've even got the US Forest Services involved. It's taken so long, but they're starting to listen and they're starting to pay attention, because guess what? Global warming is real. Climate change is real. I mean, you look at what's happening in the temperate climate zones, where there never used to be heat strokes and people dying in great numbers, where there never were floods, but now there are floods and all types of strange weather patterns. Why is this all happening? Because we are losing these important vital structures that are the pillars of life, like the rainforest, for instance. It used to be that only us in the tropical climate zones were susceptible to these changes in weather, climate, strange, unusual weather patterns, etc. No, it's now happening around the world. I mean, you look at the UK a couple of years ago, they had, heat stroke killed a number of people there. Floods in Germany, unheard of, but it happened. Wiped out villages, 150 people died, and henceforth, so forth. So we all have to pay attention. My suggestion would be individuals learn as much as possible, okay, and come together. You can start a movement. You can start a movement in your locality. You can get like-minded people, and it's not easy, because people are easily distracted by everything else that's going on. The consumerist, materialistic environment that we live in, which is constantly in our face, marketing this shiny gadget or that new thing that you need to buy, which you probably don't really need. And everyone's, they're like sheeple. They're like lemmings rushing to the precipice without taking a break to find out exactly what's going on. We have to take stock, come together, petition our leaders, and have them do their jobs. Because many of them that are in parliament are not necessarily leaders. They're politicians. Anyone can be a politician, but to be a leader, well, that's not so easy. And you've got to make an effort to find those type of characters, and then you've got to have them, speak up and fight, and then you've got to support them and fight, stand by them, So I've been doing that, trying my best. That's why I'm in court so many times. I've got 5 court cases, going on at the moment. When I took office, we had so many logging companies in my province. We've shut down all of them. There are now only 3 left, and I am now in the process of dismantling all of them. My promise to my people was this: if we go through the legal process and we cannot win, if we can't win in court and the governments and the systems that we subscribe to and believe in fail us, then we will resort to tribal law, which means we will then physically deal with those who are intruding on our tribal land. We own that land and we will deal with them, including those who betrayed us. We've come close, but we aren't there just yet. But if it comes to it and we have to step up and protect our forest and our people and our land, I'll not hesitate to be there with my people to do it.
That's very powerful to hear you speak that powerfully, and yet you give a very simple recipe, as it were, to everybody else. Learn, come together, start a movement. And really, you didn't quite say it, but you said it. Don't fall victim to the consumer marketing
environment
all around.
We're contributing, Nienta, for example. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but for instance, one of the biggest problems we have for rainforest nations is the growth of the oil palm industry. Okay. They are clearing huge swaths of forests to plant oil palm. Why? Because it is a food product that is very cheap and far cheaper than any other alternative. So food manufacturing companies love oil palm. If you go and check every most packets of whatever supermarket you're buying whatever from, you look at the content, there's oil palm in it. Where does this oil palm come from? There had to be sacrifice made for the removal of these trees by someone, some person, some clan, so that this oil palm could be, so we could stop consuming that, for instance. You know, not only are you helping the rainforest, but it's good for your health, you know. So there are little steps that one can take like that, you know, individually as a person, you know.
What do you think about the EU law on deforestation?
I love it. I think it's great.
Because now you're going to be able to track things.
They don't like it. It's been a subject of debate in my parliament and within government circles here. Everyone's like, oh, the European Union's banning the importation of logs and any products, including cocoa. We're a big cocoa producing country, and coffee, because they come from deforested areas. So I said, well, you know, instead of moaning and groaning about it, we should be thankful, and then we should say, well, how can we clean up our act? For instance, we have vast grassland, okay? There's nothing wrong with farming on that land. Our land, the entire island of New Guinea, is fertile. It's rich volcanic soil. You grow anything on it. So why don't we use that? Why do we have to deforest, you know? But what we're asking also as Nianto is this. You see, the developed nations who have happily liquidated their natural environment, they're cash rich, but natural resource poor, okay? So they're in a position to help us. We're natural resource rich, but cash poor. Obviously, there's solutions there, you know? Now, the indigenous peoples around the world are playing a very vital role of taking care of these ecosystems, these pillars of nature, of life. How are they been remunerated? How are they been compensated for doing this for all of us? They're not, you know? The only template available is you got to liquidate your natural environment, and that's the only way you can get rich and then buy all the things you need and take care of, you know. So essentially we're in this mad rush, as it seems, to completely dismantle and deconstruct, liquidate our natural environment and build it with an unnatural environment where we are living in unnatural structures, consuming unnatural food, which is contributing to unnatural reactions, including unnatural thoughts, and decision making is affected by that. You know, something's not right here. We should take a break and say, hey, as long as we see, that's why this is a theory I have. That's why when COVID came around, see, COVID's a agent of nature. That's how I saw it. It's an agent of nature. It came around and it scanned people, you know, and it said, this person, you're too far away. You're not one of us. Bang, out you go, you know. So you got to be connected to nature, because that the nature recognizes its own. If you're connected to nature, you're going to survive. You're going to be okay because you're one of nature, you know. We're moving away from nature. We're becoming so unnatural that we are not recognized by nature anymore, you know, and maybe collectively the world is just getting ready. Nature's getting ready, you know, to deal with us as a parasite, because that's what we've become. We're no longer useful. We're not an asset of nature. We're a liability, you know.
There could be a horror film or two there. I think there was a film about it.
With the advance of AI now and all that's going on now, you know, I say this. I say, if the Matrix series were a person and the Terminator series were a person and they had a child, that's where we are right now, you know.
You wanted to talk about the work you're doing in your province, the conservation work. I want to hear about that. I also want to talk about a couple other things, but I wanted you to talk about the work you're doing, because clearly you're taking on the world. You've decided you're going to stay in the system, but almost warning your people and yourself. I mean, you don't warn yourself that you're saying that if the systems that are around don't work, you will actually figure out a way to protect what needs to be protected. And when you do it, you're doing it not just for your own people, you're doing it for our planet. So certainly we need a different system. for how the world is paying for something that you're protecting for everyone. And it's not just you, it's Indigenous people everywhere, right? If Indigenous people are responsible for 70 to 80% of the world's biodiversity, and we have decided that that's so important to us as a planet and as humanity, what are the economic systems that need to be adjusted? So that's a whole larger conversation. We wouldn't get into that today, but those are things we have to address somehow, and it's things that we think about and are pondering. But would love to hear more about both how could you get these other countries to do something? And is your conservation program one of those efforts as an answer to what developed nations are helping you do?
Thank you. Well, let me tell you about the Managlas Conservation Area. That's in Ora Province. It is an area spanning 360,000 hectares of rainforest. And it is home to 22,000 people from 153 clans. And these people, my people, they came together and decided 30 years ago that they would opt for protecting their rainforests rather than allow mining, allow deforestation, or commercial agriculture, because they felt that these activities would threaten who they are as a people. Now you have to understand, these people are not an educated, in the Western sense, educated people. They're educated in our tribal sense, you know. We receive a tribal education. All of us went through this, you know, where we understand our environment and their use and their importance and our purpose in all of that. So 30 years ago, these 153 clans came together and started the process of negotiating to declare their entire landscape a conservation area. And it wasn't easy because many of these tribes were tribes in conflict. They had their own issues that they were fighting over for, you know, some time. But over time, they put aside all of their differences. They educated their children. Some of the children went and became lawyers and accountants and scientists. And they came back and continued to help their, you know, clans and tribes and bring all this together until eventually in 2017, they brought it to Parliament. I was in Parliament. And we managed, even though I was in the opposition, which is a miracle in itself, I managed to convince the government at that time that this needed to happen. So they declared this area a conservation area and a recognized legal conservation area. Then we went on a search for organizations in the world that would help us. You know, we needed people who could work with us. And eventually, after some time, we found an organization called C4ECRAFT, which I think many of you would know about, the largest agroforest research entity in the world. They have about 800 scientists, and they're in 33 countries. And they do remarkable work in regards to land rehabilitation and, you know, sustainable agriculture, livelihood programs, and basically looking at how they can help preserve rainforested areas and other such ecosystems. And when we met with the people from C4ECRAFT, I was most humbled when the Director General himself flew all the way to stay in Managlas. He came with his small team, that's Dr. Tony Simons. He flew in there with Professor Howard Shapiro, who is a professor at UCal, and they both came together. They spent some time, some nights. They even engaged in tribal dances, you know. They even played volleyball in our tribal areas, you know. So, and they were fascinated with what the clans had done. And they asked me, they said, Gary, you're telling me that with no funding whatsoever from any of the governments of your country, these people came together and put this, they packaged this together themselves. And I said, yes, I'm extremely proud of them. They did this themselves. They didn't get any money from anybody. No international organization, nothing. You know, I will mention though that the Rainforest Alliance in Norway did assist one of the small NGOs with some funding to assist in that regard. So I'll flag those gentlemen and ladies from that wonderful organization. Then there was a local NGO called CELCO, which is the Center for Environmental Law and Conservation. It's a chapter here that is connected to similar movements around the world. And I said, they did it themselves. So our province then signed an MOU with with C4ECROP. They said, well, we can work with you on this. And essentially we gave them a hunting license. We said, you know, corporate speak, you know, development partners speak, you know, international organization speak, you speak on our behalf. We're giving you that honor, that privilege, and we too are also privileged to be with you on this journey. So we were satisfied that this was a credible organization with credible people. And they went out there and, you know, immediately we signed a host country agreement after the MOU. This was in Glasgow at COP26. And they spoke to the European Union and a few other organizations. And lo and behold, European Union said, hey, we can assist with this. And they had some funding. And on the 1st of July, they actually signed and put some funding aside to help this conservation area be an example, a model in Papua New Guinea and maybe around the world, where the forest people will take care of their core forested area. They will engage in sustainable livelihoods projects where they can generate income from managing their land in a sustainably environmentally friendly way, but they will protect the core forested areas. What we're working on now is how can we be able to generate income from that forest biostation, I call it. It's like it's like a service station where instead of you go to a service station, you pump gas, you can throw your rubbish, you can refresh yourself, you know. Well, this is a biostation. It's pumping out oxygen, it's sequestering carbon, you know, it's providing all these wonderful services. And the people the pump station attendants, the biostation attendants are the forest people, you know, but they need help too, you know, because they're making huge sacrifices. You know, they don't want to go down the path of liquidating their natural environment. They know instinctively that that would be dangerous for them. You know, so they're saying, hey, we're doing this. Now, what the world should do now is in such instances say, okay, well, how can we help? And understand that you're not helping the forest people. You're actually helping yourself because these are the pillars that prop up life on planet Earth. So that's currently underway. We're looking at the various governments assisting us, like the Australian government is helping build a road there. And then we're looking at they're upgrading a wharf so that cocoa, coffee, turmeric, ginger, and all types of other wonderful, you know, organic food that's grown there can be processed in a sustainable manner and exported for consumption out there, you know. So that's where we are at the moment. And it's looking very good. When this works, I have 9 similar places like that in my province. So the forested peoples of these areas, they don't want to engage in urban drift. They don't want to come to urban centers and live in cities. They detest it, but they do it because, you know, they've got no other choice. They need access to good health, good education for their children. And they feel that this is the only way where they can be relevant in the future, you know. But instinctively, they know that if they had a choice, they would rather remain in their forests, connected to nature and living in harmony with their forest. They live a far healthier, far happier life there. But how do we keep them there? Well, that's where the corporate world comes in. You know, they've got to assist. You know, they can't be just hell-bent on making profits and satisfying their board members, you know, and reporting on their balance sheets. What they've got to look at how they can also contribute to sustaining life, you know.
So it's almost like a playbook. You've got to, it's better than a pilot, really, that you have this project, 960,000 hectares. It's nothing to laugh about. And then if you've got 9 more, and then
360.
860.
No, 360.
360. That's what I meant. I know I had 360 written, so I don't know what I said. Apologies. 360,000 is what I had written down. And then you have 9 more projects. And then that also means that you can actually provide a playbook and a model for a lot of different places in Papua New Guinea and also other places, not just in Southeast Asia. So that, we need hopeful solutions that spring from the people themselves, but assisted by other people as well in far off places, because it is one planet. Yes. And we've got to start recognizing it, right? So a couple of things. One of them is, you alluded to it right at the beginning, we're not indigenous. It's like we're people of this land. But one of your most interesting lines that I've used, you said it a couple of years ago, and I've used it. We're all indigenous to our planet.
Correct. You see, Nianta, I keep saying this. I said, if the people who are acting contrary to life or sustaining life, they're acting in a very alien way, and you have to think, these must be the aliens on Earth. Because if you're from Earth, you shouldn't be acting in a destructive manner that's shutting down your own future. That makes no sense. But that's how a lot of organizations are operating, So we've got to help them understand that, hey, you're not going to be relevant in the future if you don't contribute in a meaningful way, And we should be all alarmed when something is happening to the people of the Amazon forest, When something is happening to them, we should be all alarmed, And we shouldn't say, say for instance, Brazil is a sovereign nation, so we can't interfere. No, that's an excuse. These are assets that belong to humanity. These are assets that belong to nature. These are assets that belong to the planet. And all of us are responsible in some way, shape, or form for these assets. Just because it's in a particular country doesn't mean that we fold our hands and say, oh, that's a sovereign nation. It has to be allowed to do whatever it wants. Well, if whatever it's doing is threatening life on Earth, we're all going to be impacted by this. We should be alarmed. We should take some form of action. Isn't that why there's organizations like the United Nations? What are they there for if they're not there to assist in, shining a spotlight on this issue and, getting something done about it, something positive?
It's interesting.
Yes, we are indigenous to Earth. There's no planet B as far as we know yet. We haven't, and nor have we found a way there. Not yet. Maybe in the future, but right now, this is all we've got. This is the only home we have.
And we must protect it. There's a Brazilian justice who said there is no greater human right than a right to live on this planet with a stable climate that allows us to do
Absolutely.
so. And
Absolutely.
That's exactly what it is. You wanted to share some things people could do. You've shared several things already that people can do and should do. You've suggested that people go and get educated, people learn about things, run for political office, stay and work in the legal system, get informed. You've also talked in the past about holding governments accountable. There are a lot of pledges that get made. You talked about Glasgow, which was where we met.
Yes.
How do we hold companies? One of the things we have at Rainforest Partnership is Gen Z for the Trees, our youth branch. And their focus and goal is to hold countries and companies accountable. It's partly what you're doing that to a great extent in multiple ways. But what are some things you would suggest? And I think you wanted to share a couple of things along those lines.
Well, thank you. I understand that there will be students participating or observing or watching. And I've found some amazing books that I felt I would like to share, for instance. That's just one of the few things that I would propose. There's a wonderful book here by a gentleman by the name of Lucas Stroman. It's this book, and it's titled Money Logging. And it's about the Asian timber mafia. and I recommend this. Anybody that wants to learn about how to protect rainforests, read this book. Read this book. Now, I'm not an agent for the publisher or for the author, but it's a wonderful book. It gives you insight as to the type of insidious entities that are involved in basically deforesting our rainforests. So that's a book I would instantly recommend for students. The other book that I found very interesting is a book by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carl Kruszelnicki. Kruszelnicki is an Australian, and it's the Dr. Carl's little book of climate change science. It's in a very easy to read format and wonderful reading. You pick it up and you won't be able to put it down. Gives you a lot of information, insight, concepts that you need to know in this fight for your planet, so to speak. That's the other book that I would propose students get a copy of. Then there is the recent book by David Attenborough, Sir David Attenborough, who has been a champion for the last, I think, 40, 50 years, actually warning us about what the consequences of, not paying attention to the natural environment, or consequences of allowing the natural environment to be destroyed or devastated or, managed in an unsustainable manner. And it's called The Living Planet and the Web of Life on Earth by Sir David Attenborough. So this is a recommended reading for university students and basically anybody who's really interested in the subject of climate change and global warming. And finally, Gordon Brown, who used to be the Prime Minister of Great Britain, he wrote a book called 7 Ways to Change the World. And that's a pretty interesting book. It's got a lot of very, very good, helpful, practical suggestions in there that I feel students would be satisfied to read and act on. And of course, my favorite author of all time, Noam Chomsky. So Chronicles of Dissent. I recommend this book highly. If you are someone who wants to do something and you want to be inspired, read this book, and it'll make you get up and want to do things, do good things for your planet, for your country, for humanity. So that's one. Also subscribe to organizations like Monga Bay, and The Guardian. I find The Guardian to be one of the better media entities out there that provide facts and balanced media views rather than what lobbyists are manufacturing for them to put out there to manufacture the consent they want for whatever it is that they're doing. That's often destructive to the planet. So those are just a few things. And now, you've got an entire university plus on these items here, these devices. You can learn so much, and you can collect data now. I mean, you can go on ChatGPT 4+ and put in there the type of prompting that will give you the statistics that you need to look at so that you can take action, write a petition, you can do a presentation, do a talk, you can speak to children, etc.
That's wonderful advice. So to end this conversation, will you share with the audience, this is World Rainforest Day, we're asking people to celebrate our forests, and you've spoken about them, we know why it's threatened, what you do personally. But what does the rainforest mean to you and your family? And why do you feel this incredible passion, so that we leave the audience inspired and ready with your energy and passion for the forest?
Thank you. So when I was a child, I would walk through our rainforests with my grandfather, who raised me. And when I was in the rainforest, these giant trees around us, this amazing flora and fauna, birds, creatures of all types, you didn't see them as being separate from you. They were part of you. And when you walked on the earth with your bare feet, you realized that you were part of this living, thriving system, and it protected you, it sustained you. And so you had a responsibility also to reciprocate, to share your energy and what you have with those in the rainforest. And wherever we went, we found that whatever we desired, we had right there, and that contributed immensely to my happiness as a child, and as I grew older and moved further and further from the forest so that I could live a life, raise a family, do all of that, get an education, etc. I always felt the need to return to the forest to reconnect and remind myself of those responsibilities, And I came to realize that for us, human beings, we have a huge responsibility as the most intelligent beings we know on Earth to managing, sustaining, protecting the environment. That's our role in life, not to destroy it, to protect it, to manage it, to prepare for a better future, whatever it is. But without our efforts, we would lose all of this. And we have to move away from the destructive path that we've taken and get back on the pathway where we are working with our natural environment, not against it. We shouldn't be converting this natural environment into an unnatural world. An unnatural world is a grim future. It's a dark future. It's jumping off this precipice that Sir David Attenborough has warned us about. We're no longer rushing to it. We're there. So I feel that if we ever needed reminding of what it is that's important about being a human being, we need to reconnect. We need to go back to the forest. We need to go and just shut off our devices and listen to what the rainforest is telling us, to listen to what nature is telling us. And all the inspiration you ever need is right there. You'll find it. You just make that effort.
What a beautiful message. Thank you so much, Governor Juffa.
Thank you, Nyantha. And thank you, everyone who took time to listen. And I wish you all well. And I urge you to get out there and reconnect. Take off your shoes, walk barefoot, find a forested area, and pay attention to all the creatures around you. They're telling you, they're giving you messages if you care to listen. Breathe oxygen and be grateful that we have this opportunity to live on, as far as we know, the only planet that has life on it.
Well, thank you. Happy
World
Rainforest Day to everybody.
Happy Rainforest Day.
Yes. And so for us, we're asking people to join us, to be the ones we've been waiting for to help us do what we're doing, and make every day World Rainforest Day for our lives.
True.
So,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.